Josiah. Welcome to Learn Me Something.
Happy to be here. Welcome to you, to you as well. You always welcome me, but I never welcome you, so welcome.
Thank you for welcoming me in return. If you're watching the podcast today, you can see that there's a lot going on. If you're just listening, let me describe it to you. I'm currently wearing a cervical collar, is what the official term.
It's a
Most
neck
people
brace
refer to it
for normal people that are not
neck
in
brace.
the medical field.
Yeah. It's horrible. So the punishment, if you're new to the show, first of all, welcome. Second of all, it's a competitive podcast, so there's a loser every time. I was the loser of the last one because Josiah brought in his wife, and there's just no beating that.
She did a good job. And she killed it.
She did. She did great. So my punishment was I had to wear this neck brace morning to night, one day. And so we found it at Walgreens. Looking for it was one of the worst parts because we found the brace section of Walgreens, and it was not in there. It was next to the adult diapers for no reason at all.
Really?
Yeah, so we had to ask a guy. We were about to give up, and then a guy was like, hey, do you need some help finding anything? And we was like, yeah, I'm looking for a neck brace. He was like, oh, they're over here. It was the weirdest interaction ever. And then he walked us through the adult diaper section. I was like, I'm starting to think he doesn't know where this actually is. But sure enough, they were right there. Put it on. So I did it yesterday, and then I took it off for the last few hours of the night so that I could wear it recording tonight.
Perfect.
Because I thought it'd be funnier.
It's beautiful.
It's, when I first put it on, I was like, this thing is horrible. It's like so, I felt like I couldn't breathe. It's super itchy and uncomfortable. And then I kind of got used to it for a little bit. And then after a while, it got really horrible. And it's just like Saturday was my lazy day, and I was trying to like look at my computer, and you can't even like look down well.
Yeah, you have to like lean forward at the hips.
Yeah, everything is like you have to move your whole body to be able to do it.
Did you go out at all, or do you stay at home the whole time?
I stayed at home all day purposefully. I was like
hiding.
So what I didn't realize, I guess it makes sense. This is like horribly visible. Like there's no blending in. It's just obnoxious, and it like catches your eye. It's horrible.
Does it feel like a marshmallow? Because it looks a lot like a marshmallow.
It feels like, I guess I don't know what it feels like. It does not feel like a marshmallow. It's decently cushioned, I guess. Okay. So like if I really want to look down, I can force it. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, this was one of my least favorite ones in a while. Just
really?
Yeah.
That bad, huh?
I just thought it was so uncomfortable.
Oh.
And maybe I'm just like too used to like looking down. Maybe it's a posture thing, but I haven't enjoyed it.
Okay. And it hasn't helped your posture that much? Speaking of posture, I'm going to sit up a little bit more.
No.
Okay.
One other thing to note. Do you want to explain to the people the shirt I'm wearing?
Yeah. If you're watching, Caleb has a shirt on that says Michael W., not Michael W. Smith. Could be easily confused.
Might be Michael W. Smith. We don't know for sure.
I don't think so. I actually know for a fact it's not. It's a different W, but I purposely blurred it because Michael W. left us a comment on one of our social media posts, and it just says, "These guys suck." Just nice and easy, nice and simple, just straight to the point. And we kind of were like, "That's our." I don't know if is that the first. That's probably like the first hate comment we've ever gotten, which is kind of surprising, being on the internet for so long.
Yeah, it's the first negative review, I think. Yeah.
Or like straight out negative. Not constructive at all, and we just thought we should just put it on some merch. So you can currently go buy this, either the shirt or I have right here a mug, Michael W's kind words to us, and then on the back of both of those is like our logo that's similar to what's on the cover art.
We think it's fun. If you want to, you can decide whether or not that supports the hate or supports us or a little bit of both, but
I think it supports us. It does support us. So whether you like us, or I guess if you like us, buy it, it'll support us. If you don't like us, buy it, and you can share your true feelings with the world with your shirt or your mug.
If you're passionate enough that you hate us that much and that you feel like you have to be wearing your hatred, then we've made that an option for you.
or if you just want to do a little tongue-in-cheek, little fun, cutesy little I'm in to the inside joke scoop type of merch, that's kind of what it's for. So either way, it's up. We'll link to it below.
We have one more order of business before we start presenting. The nightclub episode. So if you're a patron of us, you get exclusive episodes on Patreon. And we gave you a little sneak peek into what was coming this episode. It is episode 5 of the season, and it integrals of 5 when we remember. We do a themed episode, and that's what tonight is. This episode is themed. What's the theme?
Another themed episode. We're doing Space Round 2. We've done a space-themed episode before. We're doing it again. We both love space.
There's too much in space to not have more than one
episode. Big place.
Yeah.
People don't know, but it's big.
Abby won it for you last episode. So you're welcome to choose your own adventure. Would you like to go first? Would you like me to go first?
I would like to go first.
Okay. Feels like I saw that coming, but go for it.
Alexei Leonov was just finishing up his spacewalk. He was the first human to be in space without the safety of a craft, and the year was 1965. It was unknown what would happen if a human entered the vacuum of space with just a suit, but Alexei discovered that a human could survive and even work in space with just a suit. He said he felt like a seagull with its wings outstretched, soaring high above the earth.
Wow.
He spent over 10 minutes outside in space, and it was about time to start coming back to the orbiter. So he started heading back, and his spacesuit was kind of deformed. He didn't notice it a ton, but it was starting to become deformed.
Oh.
Because of the lack of pressure in space. That I guess is something they didn't necessarily take into account. They've never done this before. A big learning curve.
Gotta try things out.
And it was so like inflated because of the lack of pressure. It was going out that his boots and his hands and feet pulled in from his gloves and boots. Is that can you picture that in your head a little bit?
Yes, I think I can.
So kind of deformed. And he's like, I have to get in here. I only have about 40 minutes of oxygen left. And I have 40 minutes to get inside, basically. But I can't do it unless I release some oxygen.
Oh, man.
So he goes to the airlock and just starts wriggling in head first, as like just slowly wriggling and squirming in as much as he could while releasing oxygen from his suit, depleting how long he could be out there. Like the time that he's out there decreases the more he does this, but he has to. And so he's just squirming and squirming. He doesn't tell ground control. He doesn't want anyone to worry.
He's just on his own up there doing the Martian thing.
Just trying to get back inside. He was working up quite the sweat. It was very sweaty. He said later that he was sloshing around in his suit.
Ooh, that is
sloshing means lots of liquid. I do have to say that.
Yeah.
So he eventually got inside, but this was the start of a long, treacherous, and unexpected journey for Alexei and his crewmate Pasha Belyayev. So today, I'm going to be talking about the re-entry of Voskhod 2.
Oh.
I'm assuming you've never heard about this story.
Continue. It's a possibility. I don't know any details, though.
Okay. So, go back a little bit. Mm-hmm. Alexei Leonov is a Soviet cosmonaut. So, Soviets and the U.S. were in the space race, trying to be kind of one-upping each other as we're trying to get to the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone knows US won. Let's go. USA.
This one's for the bald eagles.
Yeah, and the bald men. Like me. Okay. So he He's a cosmonaut, which basically just means Russian astronaut.
Also makeup
Sorry,
artist.
Not Russian, Soviet. I guess that would right.
Soviet, yeah,
because
Soviet.
it was before.
It was still.
I
Yep.
really don't know how the whole thing, how they became Russia or whatever. I don't know.
I can confirm it was still the Soviets because I believe we're going to be in the same region of time for our topics.
Oh, I
Wait,
guess that
what
makes
is-
sense.
What's the year again? Sorry.
65.
Oh yeah, still Soviets.
Okay. Well, I knew it's like, how did they become Russia? Did Russia exist beforehand, or is this like a territory? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Back up to space. Alexei and Pasha are up there getting ready to come back to Earth. They had a successful spacewalk despite that little hiccup. He made it back. He's a little sweaty, but he's inside the orbiting module. And, I mean, flying high, literally and mentally, emotionally.
He's like, I just felt like a seagull out there.
Yeah.
There's no better feeling than feeling like a seagull.
Exactly. And so him and Pasha get back to work. Okay, we don't have a ton of fuel left. We can't just hang out up here. We're one of the few people to be in space, but we got to get back. We don't have a ton of fuel. We can only make one more orbit. And they realize the automatic landing system has malfunctioned.
Oh, man, they're going to have... They said, we're going to have to do this manually.
They said, we're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way.
And then he looked over and he said, buckle up, Pasha. It's going to be a wild ride.
No, he said...
That's how I think it went down.
He said, it's going to be a bumpy ride. No. Pasha says, do you remember your training? And then he looks at him and says, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And then, none other than Yuri Gagarin comes online and says, how are you, Blondie? Where did you land? So Yuri Gagarin, famously, is the first human in space, also Soviet cosmonaut.
Yep.
I'm interested to hear what your topic is, because you're saying, does that have anything to do with your topic?
Not really.
Or you just know about
we're dancing in the same timeline, so there's some overlap
Sure.
names from things I read, but no overlap in topics so far.
Okay. So Yuri comes on, how are you, Blondie? Where'd you land? So that's what he calls Alexei.
Classic.
And so Alexei's like, we're still in space.
Yuri, bad news, brother.
We're still up here. We're going to have to do this manually. We only have enough fuel for one more orbit. So they're talking between Pasha and Alexei. They're like, we're going to need to land in Soviet territory because if we overshoot and land in China or something, we don't necessarily have the greatest camaraderie or like relations with China at this point. So try and land in our own territory. That's going to be best. So they decide to shoot for a place that's not super populous, somewhat sparsely populated. It's west of the Ural Mountains, which is kind of western current-day Russia.
Sure.
In that area. So the engines turned on, and they began their reentry, and stuff was supposed to disconnect from the orbiting module. They're in the landing module, and the orbiting module is going to disconnect so they could get sent back in 10 seconds. So they counted down, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nothing. And so they start going. They didn't hear like the little click. That means that everything got disconnected. So they start going and feel a tug, and they feel all this pressure, all these G's, and so much so Alexei claims at one point the gauge read 10 G's is the force that they were experieing.
Whoa.
A lot.
That's significant. That's more than I've ever experienced. That's how many G's that is.
At least 10 times what I'm experiencing right now.
Wow.
And so they realize they are spinning around the center point of this communications cable that is connecting their landing module to the orbiting module, and they're just spinning as they're entering near Earth orbit and kind of that reentry point. So they're completely out of control. They eventually the communications cable just burns up, and they're able to kind of get reoriented. The chutes go off, and it kind of becomes quieter, softer, and then a little darker as they enter cloud cover. and they land. A nice soft landing. Automatic landing was good. They're fine. They survived.
Pasha's stoked.
But it's kind of dark.
Did it.
They did it. We did it, brother. And so they land, happy to be alive, but it's kind of dark. They don't really know where they are. But their systems, after they looked at it, told them they landed almost 2,000 kilometers away from the spot they were trying to hit.
Oh, no. Bad news.
And
Wait, that's so far.
A long way.
Holy cow. Sorry, it took me a second to hear that number fully.
It's a big one. And they realize they're deep in the Siberian forest.
Oh, boy.
Which, if you know anything about Siberia, lots of cold.
Their forests are more cold than they are warm, is something that I've learned.
They're Russian. So they try to get out. They do the ejection door blast thing, like, poof, and then the door comes off. But they just smell the gunpowder like it's blasted, and then nothing happens.
Oh, are they stuck in there?
They're stuck in there. So there's a tree in the way blocking them in. So they lean. Goodness. They're like rocking the lander back and forth. Eventually, they rock it out so that they can push the door out.
Yeah.
And then they're like just breathing Earth's air again. Like they were just in space for over 24 hours. They just take a second. They breathe it in. Give each other a big hug. They're like, we did it. I just was in space, dude. And just celebrating.
I was in space and I came back and I'm still alive. That's a win.
Little sweaty, but I'm good.
Your visual storytelling is reminding me of Gravity. The movie. Sorry. I should have been clearer.
I was like, that's
the
very
Sandra Bullock
deep.
feature film.
It's where she deep and thoughtful. What does that even mean? I don't get it.
It reminds me of Gravity, Josiah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess it is kind of. It's about a reentry from space.
Yeah. Anyway,
so they take their celebration. They're like, okay, that's good. We need to figure out how to get out of here. So they step out of the lander and sink up to their chins in snow. It's March.
Oh boy!
In the deep Siberian forest.
Yeah.
Still winter, basically.
Yeah.
6 feet of snow. And
holy cow.
They're both used to harsh conditions like this because they kind of grew up in forests and similar areas. So they're not too far out of their league, but...
And they were just in space.
They're just in space. They're kind of trained for, harsh conditions. It's colder up there. They're like, we'll be fine. But they did know, they said, this is a region where bears and wolves live. And they knew this is kind of the mating season. They tend to be a little bit more...
active and aggressive.
Yes, that's the word, aggressive. Yeah. But thankfully, as plays into a Russian stereotype, they had a pistol aboard. Which...
on their spaceship?
Yeah. I was like, why would you bring a pistol on your space station? But then I thought, aliens.
Exactly. They don't know. They don't know what's up there.
Seriously, what if there's like a little bacteria that grows infinitely fast and you have to shoot at it a bunch?
Get the pistol! And then Pasha says, "We can't shoot that. We're in a spacecraft. We'll both die." And then Yuri says, "This is the only option."
And they do it, and there's an explosion. Or what if there's like a bacteria that controls one of their minds, and then he goes crazy, and then he has to shoot him in a sad poetic somehow moment. Could happen.
Essentially, the Soviets were just planning for a future sci-fi flick to be made. They're like, let's get this pistol up here just in case it turns into a cool nonfiction story someday.
Make sure you get the nice Ari and red cameras going. They're mounted. Make sure you get some good shots. And we'll piece it together what we can.
As much as we make fun of it, they're now like, this is like, we've got a lifeline. We've got a pistol. So glad they decided to pack this.
It makes... They're like, we only have one pistol, but they said they had lots of ammunition, apparently.
Sweet. They're like, who knows how much you're going to have to be shooting up there.
We might just shoot for fun. We might just find a tree and try and knock it over with all this. But they're like, no, we hear the trees started cracking, the winds picked up, it starts snowing, and the temperatures began dropping. They're like, it's going to be a cold night. They sent out a rescue signal when they landed, but they didn't know if anyone had received it. And later that afternoon, they heard a helicopter. So they get out and they go investigate. But it wasn't a military helicopter. It was a civilian chopper. And they had heard about it from a cargo plane that had heard the rescue signal that they sent out. So kind of word spread. People went out to the area. And the helicopter came and dropped like a rope ladder. And they're like, we're in spacesuits. We can't climb this. And so word spread, and more and more helicopters and planes were flying by, just trying to help. But at one point, Alexei said that they were worried that there's going to be a crash because there were so many planes and helicopters in the sky. But one of them dropped a bunch of clothes and some boots, and then an axe and a bottle of cognac, which immediately broke when it fell from the helicopter, which makes
wonderful.
Sense. Like, we'll just scoop this up in the snow, I guess. A little snow cone, cognac, snow cone. Good work. I don't think they were in the mood though. So the clothes fell in the tree. They weren't able to climb up and grab the clothes, but they grabbed the wolfskin boots and headed back to the lander. Nobody was going to get to them that night. It was so dense they couldn't climb the ladder with their. It was like too flimsy, the ladder they had, and they couldn't climb it with what they had. So they got to the lander, and Alexei says that he felt sweat up to his knees because they're still in their spacesuits at this point. He said there was so much sweat in it that had accumulated, that just from the space stuff and trotting around in the snow and
some adrenaline, I'm sure.
Yeah. So he was very sweaty, and it was getting so cold. He's like, if I don't get dry, this was just going to make me freeze way quicker. So they take off the spacesuit. They take off all of their clothes, literally everything, wring all their clothes out, just standing there in the Siberian forest completely naked, wringing their clothes out in a lander, which quite the story. Nobody has had that story happen before except for these two guys, and probably never will. And so then they separate the hard outer shell of the suit from the inner lining that will keep them insulated, and they kind of put everything on with the wolfskin boots, and they wait out the night. And it was a negative 22 degree Fahrenheit night.
Oh my goodness.
Insanely cold. And they weren't able to get the door back on from the lander. They tried to get like the parachute, but that was too much work. So but they made it through the night, and the next morning, they woke up to an airplane, and they fired their flare gun. Airplane saw it, and out of the forest later came a group of men on skis. And they're like, yes, we're saved. They're here. And so
Could you imagine skiing up on some dudes that are like, hey, I hate to ask this. Were you recently in space? You guys look like you were just
You guys
in
were
space.
the space guys, right? They're like, oh, good. Thank goodness. So, yeah, these guys, among them, there was a couple doctors, another cosmonaut that had heard about it and came out, and then a cameraman along with some local guides that brought him out there.
Nice.
So these guys began chopping down trees to make a space for a helicopter to land so they could get pulled out. And then they just got all the amenities going. They built a little log cabin, which I love.
Wow.
Got a fire roaring. Somebody brought in their helicopter a big tank that they could heat water in, and they could like bathe.
So just like, we can't get you out, but you can just move into this location.
We're going to bring the city to you. Exactly.
That's awesome.
And they made them a feast of cheese, sausage, and bread. And they weren't able to get all the trees cleared out, and it wouldn't be until morning until it was ready. So they spent one more night out in the wild, a little bit more comfortable this night, though. And some warm clothes.
They just showered.
Basically. Just a casual shower in the middle of the forest.
They were watching TV.
Yeah.
Just hanging out.
They brought, some of the guys put on a little stage production for them.
Cooked up a pizza.
Yeah, here you go. So next morning, they skied 9 kilometers to the clearing, which was, I guess, the best spot for it to be.
Yeah.
and then hopped in the helicopter, flew back to the launch site, and they still had to deliver mission report because they got back and they had this crazy survival story. They lasted 2 days in the forest. We were also in space right before that, so we gotta report on that.
Science. That's
what
right.
happened?
Science.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And so Alexei kept it pretty short and sweet. He said, "Provided with a special suit, man can survive and work in open space. Thank you for your attention." And,
that's all he said?
So that was his quick report. I'm sure they did a deep dive later, but
all of the 100 people involved with getting him up there are just like,
is
what?
that it? Did you take pictures or notes or anything?
Yeah, did you get any readings, anything that could help us ensure the future of our craft and our search?
Was it fun at least?
Give us anything. Did you feel like a seagull?
Come on.
Tell me you felt like a seagull up there.
Please. He's like, oh yeah, I did. Forgot to say that. Yeah. So the Soviets would go on to launch the first space station and would also go on to lose the space race.
USA. Let's go. Freedom.
Best ending to a topic ever. But also, Alexei Leonov actually would go on to exchange the first international handshake in space as 2 separate flights docked onto one vessel, and Alexei shook hands with a NASA astronaut, Tom Stafford, which was kind of the symbolic end of the space race, with the Soviets shaking hands with the Americans, kind of peaceful. And then the ISS, International Space Station, came after that, and that was kind of his some of his big accomplishments as a cosmonaut.
Wow,
crazy
that was
story.
Fun. I love that. Can you imagine? So hear me out. You're up in space, and you're in arguably the biggest danger of your entire life from the very second you took off from Earth. You go up into space, you're just in imminent danger, like constant threat of immediate death. Every minute you spend up there is like, man, this could be the minute I die. Especially in the early days when they're still exploring all this.
They don't know anything.
And hadn't figured out all the science, and then you do your spacewalk, you survive that, you're like, holy cow. You're going to go to land, and you're like, oh, we've got issues with the landing. Then you try to land, and you're spinning, and the G-force is out of this world. All to land, and then, like, it stops, and you're alive, and you can feel the gravity again. And then you get out of it and realize, oh, wait, I'm still in imminent, immediate threat of death here. Like, just how defeating that must feel. It's like, I just landed from something so few people will ever do, and I might just die anyway.
Yeah, just the
That's just
silliest way. A dock, like a cable didn't become disconnected, and sometimes the littlest thing. I mean, with space, a lot of the things that have gone wrong were tiny, like very, very small. Like in the Apollo program, one of I don't remember which mission it was, but it was the one where they launched and basically just exploded within a minute. That was like, they figured out it was just like a D-ring or something. Some little silicone.
Just one little thing.
Yeah, it failed and everything was gone. So like very, very tiny margins of success. Like if one thing goes wrong, kind of with this type of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that went wrong. He said, looking back, that on this mission. I forgot to say, when he was in space, he had a camera attached to his chest.
Yeah.
And the shutter was attached to his thigh, so you just press his thigh and it would take a picture. But his spacesuit was so deformed and puffed up and everything that he couldn't press the shutter, so he didn't get any pictures with that camera.
Oh, and the photographer / scientists that work together to create that camera system, and we're so excited. We're just like, seriously? Not a single picture? That's so funny.
Yeah. I'm sure they had other cameras and things, because I believe there's photos of this mission, but just not that one. Not
his
the actual
camera.
first spacewalk in history. But
they still had the Ari and Red cameras.
Oh,
They
that's true.
had
I
those
don't
rolling.
think they have
Yeah.
released those yet, though. I think they're still waiting.
Nothing super interesting happened
Yeah.
regarding the pistol and aliens, so they're like, it's not worth a release.
Maybe now
A
that
theatrical
CGI is
release.
pretty good, they'll fill it in with little. But
Do something. Tell AI to add in some aliens here and there.
yeah, add aliens. Enter. Okay, that's all I got.
I love it.
Crazy
Very
story.
fun.
Yeah,
I love a good crazy story episode.
it's good. Wasn't in the,
I
it
will
was in the
say-
60s this time.
I'll say something before
Say it.
you give the listeners our every episode patron pitch. Before you do that, this has been the closest that we've ever come to having the same topic, to doing the same topic.
That's bound to happen. I mean,
We've talked about it before, like how long until we both bring the same topic on
It's
accident.
fitting that a space themed or just a themed episode it would happen on. But we actually
narrows the parameters.
We talked about it on our recent nightclub episode, which is on Patreon. If you'd like, patrons have access to it. Patrons of any tier level, you can become a patron for as little as $1, or you can get a trial, or just listen to a little snippet of it if you want.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit more about some space stuff on that last episode, and those come out on off weeks of this episode. So if you can't get enough of Caleb, then that's your place to get more.
Twice the content.
Twice the
if you're
Caleb
looking for it.
content. There you go.
And Josiah will also be present and accounted for.
Yeah, I'm usually there too. But
Nice. Yeah.
What you
anyway,
got?
I read the start of this story and marked it as like, this could be an option to look more into before I found the topic I'm going to present. So it was at one point there's potential.
Would
have been crazy.
it's gonna happen. We do this long enough, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. That being said, actually, I'm gonna tear off my neck brace because I'm over it. Howdy, Piscouty. Well,
Give us a rotation. Give us a twirl. That's good.
That's
Good
good.
stuff.
I had just glanced at myself in the monitor and feel like my neck is like enlarged now. Like, whoa,
You have
has it always been that big?
does it look like you have a tiny neck now that you've taken that off? My neck looks
Maybe.
so tiny, and
My neck is skinny.
it's got some color back to it.
All right, Josiah.
Marshmallow neck. Okay, go ahead.
You gave a fun little teaser to, you didn't realize it, but you gave a teaser to my topic, so it's a perfect little segue. I'm enjoying this episode because things have linked up so nicely. We're going to keep it chill. I don't have any crazy stories or anything. We're just going to be talking about space stations, where they
Wow.
came from, how they work, and a little bit of history, a little bit of Soviets, a little bit of Americans. It's gonna be interesting.
I'm
You
huge
touched
into
on-
this.
Yeah, you
This is
touched
where
on
my
some fun
my
points.
research left off. Was right
Yeah.
here.
Please, Josiah, I insist, allow me to carry on. Thank you. If you're just listening, he did a little hand wave signal motion.
I was like a princess.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was really sweet.
Curtsying princess. Or a gentleman.
Okay, let's get into it.
Go for it.
So first, do you know much about the International Space Station?
I know it came after probably sometime in the 70s or 80s maybe. And I know
Okay.
there's been somebody in it since it's been up there.
Okay,
And lots
nice.
of countries are in there.
That's all the info you got?
Just about.
That's okay if it is.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think the longest time somebody's been in there is like 300 days. That's just coming out of an orifice in my body. I don't know if that's true or not. I'll let you teach me more.
Nice. So the reason I ask is because literally the only things I knew about the International Space Station were what I saw in movies. So I saw the occasional video or picture, either in like a sci-fi flick or in like a disaster film, like a apocalypse movie. I feel like the space station gets shown in those a lot as like a solar flare destroys it or something, you know. But I didn't really know much. I just knew it was like a small little space thing. Multiple countries were allowed to visit it somehow. And turns out it's actually pretty cool, and it's got an interesting history. So let's start with the basics. What is a space station? A space station is different than a spaceship in the sense that it's designed for extended use and for habitation. So it's meant to go up and sit in orbit and then just circle around and stay up there, which means it has no landing system, doesn't have any major propulsion. It relies on the orbit to just kind of keep it moving. And it also allows for in-space docking. That's going to be important. So let's do some history leading up to the big boy, the ISS. And if we're going to do that, we have to go back to the Soviet Union. And we're going to talk about the very first space station called the Salyut. It's spelled Salyut, but I believe it's pronounced Salute.
So this is the one that Tom Stafford and Alexei Leonov were on?
Well, it depends.
Oh,
There's
no.
seven.
That was the first, sorry, that was the first, like, international...
That's the first, yes.
Where two different countries are in. Okay, so, but not
Which
the first,
we'll get to
not
that.
this one. Okay.
Yeah, so the first Salyut, so essentially we beat Russia to the moon. USA! USA! USA!
Okay.
But they beat us to space and habitation. So they beat us to...
about that. That's
nobody cares about.
Nobody cares about.
That's like, oh, cool. It's
Wow,
it's
deal.
like Paramount Plus versus Netflix.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. You're there.
Went to
Whatever.
space first. Big deal.
So it's 1971. They scrap the moon plan because we beat them, right? But they have all of these parts and pieces of rockets and ships and space material, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know what? We still have all this stuff. Let's kind of pivot a little bit, and we'll create a station. So they use all these old parts and plans from their moon plans and projects, and they combine them and create the Salyut 1 or Salyut 1 in 1971, depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Okay.
So this was, key thing to note here, this is called a monolithic vessel, which means that on the ground it's assembled in its entirety and then just rocket launched up into space. So they put this thing together on Earth, they attach some rockets to it, they throw it up there, and then they like unfold things. So like some of the like the solar panels that kind of extend out, those they designed to unfold. But it's all built as just one big thing, and then they built a dock onto it. It's called hard docking, and it's what you're thinking of it's what you're seeing when you watch Interstellar. That intense dun 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 dun, and it's like spinning. Like
I was actually thinking of that. Literally thinking of that scene.
Yeah, it's so good. One of my favorite movies.
Overrated.
That's
but I
called.
love it.
Yeah,
it's for another time.
I think. Yeah.
No,
okay. Another time. No time. That's hard docking. It's when one craft permanently or temporarily attaches to another craft.
Sure.
So they sent it up there in 1971, one big piece, and then they're going to send up the crew separately to dock with it. So they sent 2 missions up to their first attempt, and it's called the Soyuz, and that is spelled Soyuz.
Yeah.
How would you that Soyuz? You think?
Soyuz. Yeah, I've heard of the Soyuz before.
Yeah. So the Soyuz is the Soviet version of Apollos. So it is their spacecraft series that they make essentially. Okay. And so they sent up the Soyuz 10, and the 10th they fly up there. It's a successful launch. They get all the way up to the station. They do all this work. They build that ship, fly all the way up there. It's a great success. They're excited. They get to the station, try to dock, doesn't work. Throwback to Interstellar when Matthew McConaughey is saying, "You can't open that. It's not a perfect latch. If you open the door, if you open the gates, it's gonna." Exactly. Yeah, and the mechanisms are like automatically trying to go.
So stressful.
Yeah, so after all that work, all that effort, they had to abort the mission because they couldn't attach to the docking bay. And so they fly all the way back, and
heartbreaking.
they didn't even, all that work, didn't even get a step foot into the station. So they build...
That is crazy.
Isn't that sad?
Imagine going all the way to a different country, traveling by boat and plane and train and car and then canoe. Then you have to backpack and you get to your cabin and the door's locked and you can't get in. So you just have to leave.
And do the same journey all the way back.
That is
and they
wild.
risk their lives, like we were talking about earlier, the whole way up. All for it to just be like, hey guys, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to abort this. I would have thrown a thing, like a floating apple or something. I would have chucked it against the wall. Anyway, yeah. And it would have slowly floated out of my hand. So they fly back, then they spend a bunch more time, and they create the Soyuz 11.
Okay.
And the 11 goes up there, and in terms of the space station portion, it is a great success. So they were able to dock. They stay in the station for 23 days, and they're kind of like checking things out. They're doing research. This is the first time that you're able to have like this prolonged stay with research equipment, able to do some stuff. So they do some tests, and then they fly home, and their spaceship crashes on the way down. They have an issue with, I forget what it's called. There's an issue with something on their ship on the way back, and so their Soyuz 11 is our Apollo's. Is it 13? Is that the one that exploded?
Apollo 13, I believe.
Yeah,
I'm not 100% sure.
Anyway, so that's their version of the Apollo's tragedy. It's big ship, and just one little thing went wrong, and it exploded. But they were able to dock, and they were able to have the first prolonged habitation in space, which is still very cool. So then they scrap the Salyut 1 a few months later, and it burns up in the atmosphere. It was never intended to last for a ton of time. And so then they have this idea, and it's called the Almaz program. Have you heard of this?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so the Soviets are like, wait. We have this project that everybody knows about because it's public, it's very public. Everyone knows that they're doing space stations and people are able to follow it and stuff.
Yeah.
It's a public program.
Yeah.
They're like, hold on. We could hide under the guise of this program some military-based space stations as well. And so they're like, okay. So they created the Almaz program, which is they're creating space stations and naming them Salyuts, but they're secretly military vessels where they're testing out space war stuff. Yeah, seriously. So the Salyut 2, they tried it again, launch failure, explodes. That was supposed to be a secret military one that everyone just thought was going to be a research base. Doesn't make it off the ground. Salyut 2, again, because you can't name it if it explodes on the Earth, so the next one gets the same name,
Really?
So, I mean, at least
that
in
seems
my
like
opinion.
it would be confusing.
I just think it's like whatever. Well, I named the first attempt Salyut 2 because that's what they were gonna call it if it made it up there.
Oh.
So it's me naming it that way.
Oh, okay.
So they named the third attempt Salyut 2
Gotcha.
because it actually made it up there. And
Okay.
that is part of a program discovered much later to be a secret Russian military program. And they seriously tested military stuff up there. They tested like weaponry and tried shooting things and just seeing what would happen. And that got found out later down the road and a whole other story.
Was that the whole Star Wars thing? Space lasers?
Oh,
Do you know anything
I'm
about
thinking
that?
of Star Wars.
No, I said Star Wars. No. No, this is a real thing. This is a real thing.
What? They're thinking about
Yeah, Darth Vader. Yeah, that's what it was. No, this is
you're
real.
I know what you're thinking of now.
It was
actually,
like,
why don't you tell it?
wasn't like JFK or
Yes, Kennedy.
His was it? I don't even know if it was the Soviets. Was it the U.S.'s plan to put lasers in space?
We both know this story because we were in the same class in high school with the same teacher that told this.
Was it
I cannot remember his name. Yeah.
We were not in the same class, but we took it at the same time.
Yeah, same teacher.
I did so bad at that class.
Me too.
I would retake it if I could. Great teacher.
Yeah, good guy. He was also the one that just has something against Delaware. I just remember that vividly. He was like,
so do I
nothing
now
good comes
too
out
because of
Delaware.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, he told us the story of Kennedy, who was trying to, do this space laser. He was looking into the science of it on the U.S. side, and then people were like, we have to be thinking about other things. We can't do the space laser.
Yeah.
And it's something to do with, I can't remember. I'm going to embarrass myself trying to mix up dates. Something to do with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
I don't know.
Anyway, all that to say, our teacher seemed to think that John F. Kennedy was determined to make a space laser on a space station and like poured a bunch of money into it, enough that the Soviets like started bankrupting themselves because they were like, they clearly have this space laser. We gotta figure this out.
Oh, so it could have been some kind of just another Cold War tactic of like
maybe
just like
or
mind games.
Yeah, or he just really wanted a space laser.
Yeah, maybe. Also, that's proof that you did a lot better in that class than I did because I didn't remember most of that. So
those details. Yeah, I'm pretty smart. No, we played like Clash of Clans, and Clash of Clans was big when we were in high school, so we were like playing that in the back.
I just have to say,
anyway,
quick aside to give you some credit. You are much smarter than me. I was actually thinking about this the other day.
No,
think about this. This
not
is
even close.
True story. Everybody listen. Caleb, be quiet. In high school, Caleb would do his homework morning of. Rarely took home homework. He would do it at school. Get great grades. Would learn it great. Just retain it wonderfully. Just a natural. And I was like, I would like bring home homework, like work on it and do it, and try and stuff, and not do as well. So I just want to shout out. Oh. You're very smart.
Well, thank you. I think you do a better job retaining things. I'm really good at like the get things done, get the good grade, and then we're out of there.
I feel like nothing. This is funny because that's exactly how I feel about myself. Maybe it's just, I guess we both project that and also both feel the same way.
Well, we were both humbled recently on the when we did our Learn Me Something live at the end of season 2. We did a live episode in person. Mm-hmm. People came and watched, and we gave quizzes. We gave a quiz as like a starting thing to see what people retained. Yeah. And like we both did really poorly on the quiz.
We did.
On the things Anyway, Josiah, we got to get back to space stations.
I'm just too busy complimenting you. Go ahead.
Thanks.
couple really big rabbit holes. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
We're doing it. So Solute 2, military. They thought they could hide it. Eventually it comes out. That one only survived 2 weeks. Then they had an issue with like depressurization. It burns up before no one goes in that one. Super bummer. So they made a total of 7 of these Solutes, one after another. 3 of them were military. The rest were actually civilian, like they said like research based, like they said they were. So only 3 of them were actually secret military spy stations.
Yeah. Okay.
Which brings us to our first great development, other than having a station, which is in the Solute 6 and 7, and it is built. These 2 were built with 2 docking ports, and this is incredibly important because the stations themselves are supported by the spacecrafts that connect with them. So the crafts come up and bring the resources and that type of thing. And so they're supported by whatever it is that connects to the station. So the station itself has some power and stuff, but generally doesn't have much resource.
Sure.
Which means with one dock, when you go up and you dock, your craft is the provider of the resource, and then when you leave, the station has no resource again, and then the next person has to come up. But with the creation of the second port, a second crew could dock with new supplies and new resources while the first crew was still there, and they could come in, mingle, hey, say hey, all that. Hey, say hey. And then the first crew could leave, and the second crew would be sustaining the station. And this allows for the first time there to be continuous habitation on the stations. So for the first time at the Salyut 6 and 7, we have the potential to have humans constantly in space without having any period in between with no humans up there. Cool development.
Okay. Yeah, that took them 7?
The 6th and 7th, yep, were when they finally.
That seems like you could figure
this.
that out pretty quick. Maybe there's some like really complicated mechanical issue that I'm sure it's possible. A lot more complicated than I'm thinking, but it
could
makes
also
a lot of
be
sense now that they did it.
The earlier iterations of the stations were not built to last super long. So it could be they were making improvements in other areas that they finally hit a point where they're like, wait, this will last long enough that we could just have people flowing in and out constantly. Yeah. So then it became necessary.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Enough about the Soviets for a minute. We got to go back to America because we're late to the party, but we still get involved. So in 1973... Two years late, we create Skylab, which is the United States' first station. It's similar to the Salyuts in complexity. Essentially, Nixon. So they finish we get to the moon, and then people largely lose interest in the space. Space exploration. And so. He's like, I'm under a lot of pressure to make cuts, especially in the space program, so I can only approve one big project. Do you want a station or do you want a space shuttle? And America's like, obviously we want a shuttle because that's closer to Star Trek.
And
brings us one step closer.
Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like, all right, you got your shuttle, but you don't have funding for anything else. But the scientists are smart, right? As they usually are. Yeah. So they said, hey, it's going to take a while for that to happen, but we have a lot of scraps from the canceled Apollo projects. They canceled the last 2 Apollo projects. We've got all these scraps. What can you give us the go-ahead to just use some of these, mess around, see if we can't just create a station with parts we have in the meantime? Yeah. So they're like, all right, approved. While we're developing the shuttle, you can make your spare part thrift store space station. So they create Skylab. Okay. And during the launch, one of the solar array wings breaks off completely. It like tears off. So they're designed to be folded in, then you get up to space, and then they unfold and are spread out with the solar panels.
Sure.
One of them, something goes wrong on launch. One of them breaks off, but they're still able to get into orbit. Everything's okay. And the U.S. is like, in classic U.S. style, that should be fine. It tore off, like we had a huge malfunction with our station, but I feel like we'll be okay. Let's just get up there and maybe we can patch it up or something and see if it'll work with just half the solar powers, the solar panels.
Yeah, so they get up there. Still work. We'll just not as much as we
things
thought.
might flicker a little bit more.
Okay, that's kind of
so they get up there. They do some repairs to the outside to make sure things are sound. And they're like, all right, I think we're good. So they go in and it works with half the solar power. Still works.
That is
and
crazy.
So they have 3 successful missions on our first ever station to Skylab.
Really?
The longest mission was almost 3 months. Not bad, America.
That's what for something that was just thrown together too.
Exactly. Also,
cool.
monolithic. Thank you.
Oh, quick.
Also
Quick note on monolithic. I got a text from your wife about 40 minutes ago that said, I think Caleb saying overloop instead of overlap calls for a goofball moment.
What?
Your wife texted
Did I say
me.
overloop earlier?
I missed it. But
Mallory has spoken,
so.
And I have the goofball. Oh man, thanks a lot, Mal.
And you kind of I'll just call that monopolistic a little bit of a goof too. So sure, two for one.
This is our first goofball use of the new season.
Yeah, I think so. Which basically, if you goof up, say a big gaff, you got to draw something and do what it says.
This says chug a glass of water.
Okay.
So you entertain the people. I'll be back in just a second.
Okay, so he is getting up out of his chair and going to go grab a glass of water. I feel like this is this goof. We had some listeners write in some goofball ideas, and I think in the live episode people came up with ideas, and this must be somebody caring about Caleb's hydration and health. So this was probably written by Mal. So thanks, Mal, for keeping Caleb hydrated.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, he's back. You got your water?
Yeah.
Oh.
There were no rules on the paper regarding the size of the cup, so I grabbed the smallest one I could.
That is a small one. Did you grab a cookie too? Okay, he did it.
Yeah, it was actually, I just finished it. Decent trip out there. Mal had just finished making snickerdoodle cookies, so.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Honestly.
Pretty good trip.
Could be
good
worse.
Bowl there. Okay.
Back to business. We're talking Skylab and using the term overlap correctly.
And
so
it was a monolith.
And
so
it was
one singular unit that they launched up.
Correct. Yep. So the whole thing was put together on Earth, launched it, spread itself out, and we're good to go. This also marks, kind of random note, marks a notable shift from from having a main team of pilots as astronauts to having more scientists, researchers as astronauts. Used to be astronauts were all pilots, cool dudes, and then they started bringing in the
they
nerds.
Were like the Tom Cruise types. Tom Cruise
exactly.
From Top Gun types, and then it was like Tom Cruise from... No, he's cool always.
He's always cool. There's no good example of
astronauts are cool too, but he's not like a researcher nerd type of guy in a movie. Anyway, astronauts are cool no matter if you're a nerd or a pilot. Nerd in a good way.
Exactly.
I just called astronauts nerds.
Oh, we are going to get some horrible lashback on this one. Backlash? Holy cow, I'm having a hard time tonight.
You okay?
It's backlash, not lashback.
I thoroughly regret that last minute. I just feel like I was digging myself in a hole. I don't think astronauts are nerds. I love astronauts.
They're cool nerds. I think they would call themselves nerds, but they're also very cool, and we respect them greatly. The Skylab was designed to be habitable, so it had shower, a giant window facing Earth, which is very cool.
So cool.
It was said the astronauts really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Private sleeping quarters, table, eating area for group meals, that kind of thing. It was 118 feet long and weighed 100 tons, which just seems crazy that you can launch something like that hundreds of miles into the air.
Up there.
It was abandoned a year later and survived another 5 years after that, so that's pretty good.
Oh, okay.
Which brings us, we're moving towards the creation of the International Space Station.
Okay.
Which brings us to the end of the space race and the beginning of space collaboration, something you have mentioned already. Do you know what it's called off the top of your head, this great meetup?
No, I don't.
It's called the Apollo-Soyuz Test Project.
Okay.
So essentially, this is an important milestone in space history because the U.S. and the Soviet Union are like, you know what? It's time for us to combine forces, for us to get over some relational issues we've had in the past and start moving towards working together. So we're in 1975, and they decided, hey, for the good of science and a future Star Trek Enterprise, we got to work together. So they planned just the cutest little idea to help kick things off. They're just the sweetest little moment. They're like, hey, in honor of us being friends, let's host a space play date. That's literally what this event is, which I'm sure if you're an astronaut listening to this, you're like, how that's so disrespectful.
No astronauts are listening to this after I call them a nerd. And then if there were some, if they turned it back on, they turned it back off after what you just said.
They all just left a 1-star review and then closed out of the app. They're like, oh, we're going back to How Stuff Works, the podcast.
Yeah.
So they formed this space play date. So a Soyuz ship launches from Kazakhstan, and an Apollo ship launches from Florida. Same day, same general time. They both take off, and literally they fly at an angle up into space and meet up in space. And that's the big plan. They meet up and hang out. The Americans take a tour of the Russian ship. The Russians come over and take a tour of the American ship, and they just hang out and they share some data. Houston and Moscow, the control centers, they also work together in planning this project and everything. It's just the cutest little reconciliation moment in all of space history. Very fun.
Keep talking. I have to do something.
Okay, sounds good. Can you still hear me?
No, but pretend I can.
All right. So this brings us to, I don't know what Josiah's doing. This brings us to a spaceship called Mir, and I'll catch Josiah up briefly when he gets back on. It is a huge turning point for space stations. Josiah, you back?
Back.
I'm talking about Mir, a huge turning point for space stations, and we have to go back to Russia to talk about this.
Is that like the spice?
MIR.
Myrrh?
It's spelled MIR.
The wise man gave Jesus?
So Mir is significant because they realized that instead of monolithic space stations, they should be focused on modular stations. And this is where space stations start to become like Legos. So we're in 1986, and this is the core of what space stations are now today. So they launched the core first, which has a total of, get this, 6 docking ports. And so the core of the space station has living quarters and has some other like resource-based power stuff, that kind of thing. And so they launch this up there, and then they start launching new, they call them nodes, little modules, little expansion pack, DLC, whatever you want to call them, latest updates. And so they can just keep expanding space stations indefinitely now, which is super cool. And all these nodes attach to one of the many docking ports.
Okay.
It's essentially very cool. And so this makes things way more cost effective because instead of creating these huge rockets to power these, they're able to just send up smaller packages one at a time. And it allows things to be much more flexible and upgradable. So when develop new research technology or want to do a new type of research, just send a new node up there and you're good to go. Attach that sucker with a little robot arm. That's what they're there for, to help attach these nodes, and you're good. Yeah.
That is so cool.
It is seriously like the peak of the space. Robot arms doing things.
It's like you build a little house, and then you add a little addition. You add a garage. You add a second bedroom. Brilliant.
I think it's so cool. And this brings us to the beast. At long last, we've arrived to the International Space Station, which is a beautiful cooperation of space exploration that includes 15 countries currently. Modern day, we've got 15 countries rocking.
Okay.
It features all the greatest attributes of its predecessors that went before it. So the multiple docking ports, modular, it's expandable, all this cool stuff. Cool stuff.
Okay.
And so it took over 30 missions and a full decade to complete this. And I didn't realize it took that long to do, and
Me
that
either.
it was that hard to it took that many missions. I just had no idea. So it orbits the Earth about 250 miles above surface level.
Okay.
And I forgot to write down the specific number, but I read that it's moving at like 17,000 miles per hour or something.
Yeah,
absurd.
something wild. Yeah.
And it's like, how do you even... Yeah, it's crazy to me. Very cool, but crazy. Here's something I didn't realize that amazes me. Did you know it's the size of a football field?
No, I pictured kind of like the first, the Soyuz 7 or whatever. Like you said, it was like 100 feet long.
Yeah.
Is that correct? That's kind of what I picture. Like,
yeah,
that
me
is-
too. But this thing is
Is that like
massive?
that much living space, or just end to end is like 100 yards?
I believe it's end to end, but it did say
either way,
it's
huge.
The inside volume is the size. I think they said a 6-bedroom house or something.
Oh,
so it's a
good big
a large
mansion.
thing.
Okay.
Every movie I've ever seen does not do it justice.
No,
because it just makes you think it's just so small. They're floating around in these little tubes,
Yeah. Wow.
So it's 4 times bigger than Myrrh, and it's 5 times bigger than Skylab, and it can support up to 6 people long term.
Okay.
But you can have short term guests. So the most people that were ever in there were 11, and then the most people ever in space at the same time is 17, because while there were 11 people at the ISS, there were 6 people in China's space station. So 17 people up there at once. So the creation of it, Ronald Reagan in 1984, he says, hey, we're going to need something like this. And he says, quote, just as the oceans opened up a new world for clipper ships and Yankee traders, space holds enormous potential for commerce today. And then he says, do it in less than 10 years. So they did exactly what he asked. 15 years later, in 1998, the first core modular is launched. So Russia launches the first, it's a U.S. project, but Russia launches the first module, the first node, which is the Zarya control module.
Okay.
And it has fuel storage, has battery power, has a bunch of docks, all the works. And then 2 weeks later, the U.S. launches the Unity node, which is an extension to that, carries some living space. And so then the robot arm, they attach it, they get it all set up and stuff. And then 2 years later, NASA sends up the first crew in the year 2000. They spend 4 months up there putting everything together and bringing the space station to life. Then they come back, and then in 2001, they send up Destiny, which is another node that increases living space by over 40%. So it's essentially, they're like, hey, let's send a condo up there and just, make things a little bit nicer for everyone.
Yeah.
And then in 2008, the European Space Agency and also Japanese Laboratory Agency, I believe is what it's called, they jump on board. They add in some new modules to help celebrate the big combination. And now, 2024, there are 15 countries currently involved. It's the size of a football field, and it weighs, this blew my mind, it weighs, if it was on Earth, it would be 1 million pounds. Almost 1 million pounds. How crazy is that?
That is, I can't quite comprehend what that means. But 1 million's a big number, and a pound is, I know what 45 pounds feels like.
And 1 million is slightly more than that. A
lot of those. So that's,
for reference,
that is pretty wild. Big hunk of metal.
Yeah, and now they're just doing all sorts of research, adding cool stuff. More countries are getting involved, and that is essentially a brief history of how space stations came to be, and potentially where they're headed as well. The International Space Station could, in theory, continue to expand and improve, and could eventually become have some like tourist areas. I don't know.
Yeah,
the world's our oyster.
You could throw up another tourist section, and then they get to come. That's where like the tourists stay, and then they come see the operations, and then they leave. I could see it. Give it a few dozen years. I don't know.
All right, there you go. That's space stations.
Very interesting. I had no idea there were so many countries on the ISS. I thought it was like 5.
15 are involved. I don't know how many are actively
up there
on it at one time.
Yeah.
I do know what you said earlier, that there has been someone since 2000, there has been at least one person in the space station.
Was somebody up there by themselves?
I don't know.
Okay.
I realized I said that in a weird way.
Well, there's been somebody up there. Yeah.
Odds are, I feel like, thinking about protocol,
probably
you couldn't
not
have just one person.
Probably not, unless, I don't know. Probably not.
And then I could be could be wrong on this date, but I believe. Let me confirm. I believe the longest day is like 437.
Oh, really? I know it's some American guy. Actually, I know there was an American guy who did it for a long time. I don't know if
I was right.
The longest. Yeah, 400 something.
It is. It is a Russian. Oh no, sorry. No, you were right. I read that article wrong. It used to be a Russian. It is 437 days.
Oh, in space.
Is the longest. 437 days in this station. Yep.
Oh, this I'm seeing from NASA 371 on the for the single longest space flight. Frank Rubio?
371 was Rubio. Yeah. He got beat by the 437.
Really?
Yeah. That says space flight though, so maybe that's not space station. I don't know.
Or there's some conspiracy. NASA's trying to hide something.
Yeah. They're covering things up.
Maybe.
We too have secret military operations.
Probably. Let's hope so.
That checks out.
I don't know.
That's all I got.
Okay, we need to go on record. I do not think astronauts are nerds.
I stand by it. I think they would agree.
Okay.
But I think they're like really, really, really cool nerds.
I'm sure they would probably say like, "Oh yeah, I'm a space nerd," or like, "I'm a nerd." But like, no, I mean, nerd. I feel like the term nerd has changed for maybe like the '80s or something. Nerd was not necessarily considered a good thing, but now it kind of is. It's like nerds. A lot of nerds are cool.
Here's a
I just feel bad.
Here's a parallel for how I feel.
Sure.
You talk about historians, and you're like, historians are generally nerdy, but then you've got like Indiana Jones, who's like, okay, he is technically that, but he's also the coolest person I've ever seen in my life. That's how I think of astronauts.
Sure.
Like they fall in the category of scientific nerd, science researcher.
Yeah.
But they're like the superstars.
Okay. I just don't want to jeopardize our chance to get an astronaut on this podcast. And
no,
I feel like
I would love. No, I don't think you did.
Okay.
If you're an astronaut and you're still listening somehow after all of this, please reach out. We would love to. We'd love to connect.
I think we should put it on them. Get on here. You do the work.
Yeah.
Reach out to us. We're busy.
We got things going on. We're important people. Oh man. Okay, tell them about the punishment.
A fantastic topic. Loved it. The punishment is it's kind of space themed. It's you have to, if you're going to eat something for 2 days, it has to be liquefied. So you have to drink all of your food for 2 days, basically. So we're talking greens, smoothies, protein shakes. That's about it. I don't know. Anything you can liquefy.
Applesauce, probably. You could drink that
as long as you can. Soups, like broths. That's what we'll say. You can't. If there's something you chew in it, spit it out.
Unless you can swallow it whole. Not for you.
It's just macaroni and cheese, fine.
Yeah.
Small pieces of steak, fine as long as you can.
There's some gray area. Yeah.
No.
Yogurt, if you're just like swallowing it.
You can. I think you can. It's up to the loser, but drinkable foods for 2 days. So vote for me. Quick little reminder as you scroll down to vote while we're just in the background. I talked about the reentry of the Voskhod 2 and the survival story of Pasha and Alexei, the Russian or Soviet cosmonauts.
I do love a good survival story. And I spoke about the International Space Stations and how they came about, how they were developed, and some cool facts.
Very cool facts.
So you should vote for me.
I love space. So cool.
Me too. It never ceases to amaze.
Yeah. Let's do a space-themed topic every episode.
This is now just a space podcast.
Don't tempt me.
Maybe every season. I could be sold for that.
Okay. We'll discuss. We'll discuss later. Listeners, provide feedback. Is that something you'd hate or would you love? Thank you for voting. Patreon, Follow us there. Find the nightclub. This beautiful mug, Caleb's beautiful shirt, the These Guys Suck collection, can be
The
found
specialty series.
in the link below on our Bonfire account is who we do it from. Pretty cool. Check it out. You got anything, Caleb? Got anything to
I got
say?
nothing. I got nothing. Let's wrap this sucker up. Hey, Larry, play us out, please.